Ethan had always dreamed of working in the heart of the wild, and today, that dream became reality. It was his first day as a ranger in the breathtaking Hwange National Park in Zimbabwe, a land teeming with life, mystery, and danger. As he stepped onto the vast golden plains, the distant calls of elephants and the rustling of acacia trees filled the air. He had come to protect the land from a rising threat, poachers who were endangering the park's majestic wildlife. Fueled by excitement and determination, Ethan set out on his first solo patrol, eager to prove himself. He had been given a map and guidance from a senior ranger, but something inside him pushed him to explore deeper on his own. What he didn't know was that this decision would lead to an encounter so extraordinary, so life-changing, that it would forever alter his fate. Stay with me to uncover what happened next. As Ethan ventured deeper into Hwange National Park, the golden grasslands stretched endlessly before him. His footsteps were careful, his senses heightened. This was unfamiliar territory. Then, something caught his eye. A flicker of movement in the distance, barely visible through the swaying grass. He froze, his heart pounding as he spotted a lioness standing motionless, her piercing amber eyes locked onto him. Time seemed to slow. She was close, too close. Every instinct screamed for him to back away, but something about her stance was different. She wasn't hunting, she wasn't aggressive. Instead, she appeared troubled. Ethan watched, trying to understand, and then he saw it. The lioness wasn't alone. Hidden behind her, barely visible in the tall grass, was a tiny cub, trembling, vulnerable. But what happened next shocked him to his core. The lioness took a step forward and did something no wild predator should ever do. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as the lioness nudged her cub forward, toward him. His mind raced. Was this a test? A warning? Every instinct told him to stay still, not to make any sudden moves. But as he met the lioness's gaze, he saw something unexpected. Not aggression, but desperation. The cub let out a soft whimper, stumbling slightly as it moved closer. That's when Ethan noticed the real danger. Just behind the lioness, half hidden in the tall grass, was something sinister. A poacher's snare, coiled tightly around her hind leg. The trap had already begun to cut into her flesh, and with every struggle, the pain must have been unbearable. Yet, despite her suffering, her priority was her cub. It was as if she knew she needed help, and somehow, against all odds, she had chosen Ethan. Would he risk everything to save them both? Ethan's pulse pounded as he gripped his radio, torn between calling for backup and acting immediately. The lioness's pleading eyes held him captive. She was in agony, yet she didn't attack. Instead, she had entrusted him with her cub. Why? The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. If he walked away now, both the mother and her cub wouldn't survive the night. But if he moved closer, one wrong step could cost him everything. He steadied his breath. He had trained for dangerous encounters, but nothing had prepared him for this. With slow, deliberate movements, Ethan crouched down, whispering softly to the cub as he lifted it into his arms. The lioness watched, motionless, her breathing labored. Then, Ethan did something unthinkable. Instead of retreating, he turned to face the trap, hands trembling, ready to free the mother. But would she let him? Ethan's hands trembled as he reached for the rusted snare, its jagged edges biting deep into the lioness's flesh. Every second felt like an eternity. Would she attack? The mother's golden eyes bore into his, wild yet unwavering. She wasn't fighting him, she was trusting him. Sweat dripped down his brow as he carefully worked to loosen the trap, his heart hammering in his chest. One wrong move could send her instincts into overdrive. The cub whimpered softly in his arms, sensing the tension in the air. With a deep breath, Ethan gave a final pull, and the snare snapped free. The lioness flinched, but didn't run. Instead, she locked eyes with Ethan in a moment of silent understanding. But it wasn't over. The wound was deep, and infection had already begun to set in. If she didn't receive medical help soon, she wouldn't survive. The lioness was finally free, but her body trembled with exhaustion. Blood seeped from the wound, the cruel snare having dug deep into her flesh. Ethan knew she needed urgent care. But how do you treat a wounded predator? His mind raced. If she collapsed now, her cub would be left alone in the wild, vulnerable to hyenas and other dangers. Gently, he set the cub down, allowing the mother to see it was safe. Then, he reached for his radio, calling for the park's veterinary team. Moments later, the roar of an approaching vehicle echoed through the savannah. The lioness lifted her head, ears twitching, sensing the new presence. Would she flee? Would she fight? The tension was unbearable. Then, as if understanding the help being offered, she did the unexpected. She stayed. Ethan watched in awe as the vets rushed in, preparing to save her life. But would they make it in time? Ethan watched anxiously as the veterinary team worked tirelessly to treat the lioness's wounds. They cleaned the deep gashes, administered antibiotics, and carefully stitched her injuries. Would she survive? As days passed, Ethan couldn't stay away. He visited the recovery center daily, standing outside her enclosure, ensuring she saw her cub was safe. The once ferocious predator was no longer just a lioness. She was a mother, fighting to live for her child. And then, the day finally came. She was strong enough to return home. The team transported her to a protected area, where Ethan gently placed her cub beside her. The mother sniffed her baby, nuzzling it softly, before turning her gaze to Ethan. Their eyes met, wild and human, predator and protector, bound by trust. Then, with one final glance, she disappeared into the golden grass. But this was not the end. One day, she would return. Weeks passed, and the lioness had vanished into the wilderness, back where she belonged. Ethan often wondered if she remembered him, if she understood that he had only wanted to help. Then, one evening, as he patrolled the savannah, something stopped him in his tracks. A familiar shape stood atop a distant hill, the lioness. The golden light of sunset bathed her in an almost ethereal glow. But she wasn't alone. Beside her stood her cub, now stronger, bolder, no longer the fragile creature Ethan had once cradled in his arms. For a long moment, she simply watched him. Then, in a gesture that sent chills down his spine, she turned and gently nudged her cub forward, as if showing it the man who had saved them. Ethan exhaled, overwhelmed by the silent understanding between them. Not all gratitude needs words. But was this their final meeting, or would fate bring them together again? Ethan thought that would be the last time he saw them, but he was wrong. Months later, on a routine patrol, he spotted fresh paw prints near the same tree where he had once freed the lioness. His heart pounded as he followed the trail. Then, in the distance, he saw them. The lioness stood tall, her cub, now nearly grown, by her side. But what she did next left him speechless. She turned, walked toward a nearby tree, and pressed her massive paw against its bark, leaving a clear imprint. Ethan swallowed hard. It was her way of marking the place where their paths had crossed, the place where trust had been forged between man and beast. The park later placed a plaque on that very tree, commemorating their extraordinary bond. Ethan smiled, knowing that long after he was gone, their story would live on in the heart of the savannah. Years passed, but Ethan never forgot the lioness who had trusted him, the cub he had once cradled, or the silent bond that had defied the laws of the wild. Even after he left Hwange National Park, the memory of that moment stayed with him. The plaque on the tree remained, a testament to the rare connection between man and beast. Visitors and rangers alike would pause to read the story, inspired by the incredible bond forged in the heart of the savannah. But fate had one last surprise. On his final patrol before leaving, Ethan saw a majestic lion standing on the horizon. It wasn't just any lion, it was CUB, the cub he had saved, now fully grown, a ruler of the plains. Their eyes met one last time, a silent goodbye. Their journey had come full circle, but their story would never be forgotten. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe.